Tired of cycling coverage cluttered with ads and clickbait? Want in-depth analysis, honest reviews, and a community of like-minded riders? Escape Collective is different. We're member-funded, so you are our priority. Get exclusive bonus episodes, insider newsletters, and connect directly with top cycling journalists. I promise I didn't write that last bit. I am just reading the script out. Join us at escapecollective.com/join.
Hello and welcome back to the How the Race Was Won podcast. I'm Dane Cash, and I guess I should start recording, Cosmo. What do you think?
Yeah, if you want to record your screen, I think that will make it a little bit easier.
There we go.
For us to put together
we're recording.
a video.
That's Cosmo Catalano, bike racing analyst extraordinaire, and I record my screen so that he can turn this into an awesome, little video for Instagram. And Cosmo, how are you?
I'm well. And in addition to cycling analyst extraordinaire, I am also a seasoned IT professional. But prior to this, Dane and I actually had a conversation about USB and Thunderbolt.
It's true.
And all sorts of. So, if this whole Escape Collective thing doesn't work out, maybe we can start like a little IT business.
I like the way you pitched that because it was very much a, by the way, I can also do this thing. So if you need a seasoned IT professional, give me a call. You are a great bike racing analyst, though. So I can't imagine why anyone wouldn't want you doing that first and foremost. There's lots to analyze this week as well. We are going to talk week 2 of the Giro d'Italia this week on our show. We'll talk a little bit about the Volta a Burgos in Spain. We'll look ahead to what's next at the Giro. All of those things are on the docket here on, for us, Sunday, May 19th. And it'll go live on the rest day of the Giro on May 20th. So let's get into it. So we are in 2/3 now into the Giro d'Italia. And a certain Tadej Pogačar has extended his lead since we last talked. But a lot of things have happened since then. Quite a few stages.
Many.
Before we get into how these stages have been won so far, what is the headline, Cosmo, of the second week of the race?
Wholesome content, even with the GC race decided. I have enjoyed the bike racing, and I think a lot of it has to do kind of with the breakaways we've been seeing, which I think you're planning to talk about later. And I think we've had some like wholesome, just relatable content that maybe we were missing out on earlier in the race. We're finally getting here, in addition to Pogačar being the strongest dude by a country mile at this event.
I'm trying to think of some kind of wordplay with relatable, because we saw a brother of a winner last year take a win this year, a relative. Nothing's coming to mind. I'm just pointing that out, that's in my brain, but I'm failing to come up with something clever. Hopefully this stands in as a clever thing.
Fair.
Just imagine me saying something clever about that.
Will, just voice in something clever over this.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that means I still have to think of it at some point, before the show goes live, and I don't know if that's going to happen. How was the race won over the last week?
Stage 10, we had a mountain light day, mountainous day, but the GC boys didn't really come out to play. But we did get Valentin Perepintre, who is apparently long looked up to Romain Bardet, and at one point they were riding together before Perepintre broke clear and won the stage, kind of extending our Pogačar is maybe not trying as hard as he could from the previous week, or it's not winning as hard as he could. We saw Bahrain Victorious kind of take up that mantle of driving the GC group in favor of their boy Tiberi. Not a lot of GC action in the end, but just kind of continuing something we had talked about earlier. Stage 11, we saw another Jonathan Milan sprint win. Maybe Lidl Trek's like least cohesive, but they still did a pretty good job keeping him out of the wind. And we saw Tim Merlier contest the sprint against Milan, like looked not as strong as Milan, but like he was putting in a good challenge.
Close-ish.
Yeah, until he got relegated, which highlights that we really need some sprint rules. I might talk about that a little later. Stage 12, we got our Alaphilippe win. It was a huge, huge break him and Mirko Maestri? I want to say Maestri because of Latin, but I don't think it is.
I was just going to say, my Latin training would say Maestri, right? But
yep.
Yeah.
Like 2-rider breakaway and just complete commitment from both guys. Eventually, Alaphilippe broke away. Maestri got caught before the line, but Alaphilippe took that stage win that everybody wanted him to take the previous week. Didn't come together. I think it's a real dunk for him. He's had a rough patch. Great win. And Polti Cometa just brilliantly put out this piece of content with Maestri talking about the stage a day or two later, saying how excited he was to ride with Alaphilippe. He was his rival. Like how like they were cheering each other on the break, everything. It really drove home the fact that bike racing is about putting a sponsor name on a kit and putting it on TV as much as it is about taking a big result. Because Maestri didn't get one, but he got a ton of camera time and he got a really good story. Probably the most wholesome story of this year.
Very wholesome. Yeah. And Alaphilippe, I think, we'll just talk about this right now. I think he was really glad to have Maestri with him at the time.
Mm-hmm. I don't think he would have stayed away alone. That's 126K.
Exactly. I think he wanted to be there as long as he could.
Yeah.
And that's a sort of a funny thing in cycling where you can really benefit from having someone else who might win the stage with you. And Alaphilippe played that really well. That was racecraft. That was solid tactics from Alaphilippe, who had already been close on a stage at this race. But this is the one where it all came together. And it's funny, I think, the profile, if you look at the profile 3 years ago, this is like, obviously Alaphilippe. This is a perfect Alaphilippe day. And it turns out it still was. But he ended up taking what was a pretty surprising win, just because it has been a little while since he's won a Grand Tour stage. And yeah.
I still can't believe how far away he went. There's stages that are 127K long.
Yeah.
And a 2-rider solo, with a strong chasing group on a breakaway day. Chapeau, man. That's a win.
Chapeau. Yes, indeed. All right, stage 13.
Stage 13, just absolute perfection. Jonathan Milan won. Absolute perfection from Lidl Trek. This, you want to show somebody what a sprint lead out is. Show them the stage. Complete control of the race from 1.5 kilometers out. I think they had 4 guys starting the train with Milan at the back. This was Cipollini in his prime, in high definition. You can find old clips of the Cipollini trains on YouTube, and they're terrible because people weren't as good at filming bike races back then, and the cameras were bad, and it's YouTube. It's super compressed. This is just incredible. This is sprinting. Go watch it. Show your friends. Be like, look, teamwork. It's a team sport, I promise.
And a team that is not, or at least was not, a year ago, was not known as being good at this. This was not a skill set that you associated with this team. And they have managed to, in relatively short order, become serious contenders for, the well led out sprints, the classic sprints. That is something that Milan himself probably deserves the lion's share of the credit for. But we already did plenty of heralding for Consoni and the team in general for just being able to set him up. They've got Edward Toons. They've got a handful of guys who are very, just capable and know what they're doing in that finale. And maybe they were just waiting to have a sprinter of that caliber to then kind of put it all together, because they didn't have that skill until Milan kind of came along. So maybe that was always there, but we've seen it.
It's interesting. I think it was Toons. It might have been Toons or Consoni. I can't remember which. I think it was Toons. They were talking about how everybody on the team is pretty versatile. They knew what they were doing in the crosswinds. There was a crosswind split earlier in the race. Milan was actually on the wrong side of it, and there was no panic. It wasn't a huge rush. They knew everybody. Most of the people in the first echelon were GC guys. They just didn't want to lose time. No one, all the GC guys were in that echelon. Wasn't going to be a big deal. They brought it back. They're all big guys. I think he said everybody was over 60 kilos. No, I couldn't. No, because I'm 75 kilos. Anyway, they're all big dudes. So they know how to ride in a pack. They know how to deal with the wind. They know all the stuff they need to know. Yeah, and like you said, they just needed that kind of guy to finish it off. And they clearly have him. They've
got one. And obviously they're going to be happy with Jonathan Milan for many reasons, but another reason to be happy with Jonathan Milan is his age. So you have to think that this is going to be a team that will continue to be thriving in the sprints for quite a while, because he's only 23, and that's I mean, that means he should have quite a few years ahead of him. If you look at some of the career arcs of other big guys, I mean, a lot of people compare him to Kittle, who retired a little early.
I think he's better than Kittle.
Hot take.
Okay. I mean, so the thing with Milan, right, is he was a very critical domestique in the classics too, like super domestique.
Yeah.
Like people have to respect that speed. Obviously, he's a big guy. He's going to struggle on some of the climbs, but like he was mixing it up. He was huge in Get Wevelgem. And it's just, I think it's really cool to see something like this where you have a rider who is clearly top class sprinter, looking like the best sprinter in the world right now. We'll see what happens in July. And he did a bunch of just helping his team out all spring, and now he's getting the payback.
The versatility is definitely a place that he stands out compared to a lot of other big speed guys. Because I think you tend to think of those guys as kind of being on the opposite end of the spectrum. So yeah, absolutely. All right, stage 14. That was not a mass start road race.
It was not. It was an individual start time trial.
Yes.
It may sound like something that happened last week, and it looked a lot at times like something that happened last week. I was struck by eventual stage winner Filippo Ganna getting interviewed prior to Pogacar's start and being very nervous and not really interested in talking with the media. I think maybe got some nudging from some friends or some teammates like, hey, you should talk to these people. Because after Pogacar came back to beat him in the first TT, he did not talk to anybody. He was in a very dark mood. And this was like, you could kind of see him like, because Pogacar started ahead of him on time splits. It looked like Pogacar was trying to win this time trial. And he faded towards the end. I don't know whether that was he felt like he had gained enough GC time, or he didn't pace right, or he just YOLO'd it and just was trying to stay ahead of Ganna's time checks for as long as he could. But he fell off at the end, and that really gave Ganna the clear, like, I am the strongest time trialer on an actual time trialer's course in the peloton.
Yeah, compared to the previous time trial, the time trial from a week before, stage 14 was way flatter, because the previous time trial was flat right up until the end where the road kicked upward into a climb, and that very much suited Tadej Pogacar, who, newsflash, can climb. Filippo Ganna, for a time trialist, is pretty good at climbing. We've seen him win some breakaway type stages, but not obviously Tadej Pogacar, and this was a way better time trial for Filippo Ganna. I think it also, I think Pogacar, maybe. We'll never know. We can't read his mind. But I do think that Pogacar probably cared a little bit less. Is it fair to say that?
He's going to try to go fast, but it's not going to ruin his day if he goes slow. Like,
he wanted to. Well, first of all, there was a high mountain stage coming that he had ambitions for. But Filippo Ganna took the win. Timo Nennesman from Ineos was third, and then this time Geraint Thomas still lost a significant chunk of time to Pogacar, but was a little bit better than in that previous time trial, and I think helped cement himself. Well, I don't think. He helped cement himself as the next best rider in this race, finishing with enough time to leapfrog Danny Martinez in the GC battle. So now we have Tadej Pogacar, head and shoulders above the competition, but Geraint Thomas sitting comfortably in that second spot.
All of Ineos, like, they had 4 riders in the top 10, and should have had a 5th, except Magnus Sheffield crashed. And that took him down to like 13th
brutal
or something.
Looking.
Yeah, it was one of those front wheel goes away and there's nothing you can do kind of crashes. But like the time trial performances they've been putting in this, and they came with a really strong team. But like, these guys need to get the team time trial back at the Tour. Like, this is a great argument for how do you beat these, super powered GC guys that are clearly head and shoulders above the rest of the field. You make them ride a TTT.
I hate this idea, but you may be right.
I know you hate it, but you know what? This is, I think, a competitive advantage for the Ineos squad.
They certainly have talents there. Absolutely. Stage 15, mountain stage.
Yes, I think we call this the Queen stage. This is
maybe the hardest stage in the race. I think there's some debate, but I believe it. It's fair to call it the Queen stage, and it ended with a kind of.
There were dudes on e-bikes walking this finish. That is how rugged it was.
Yeah. The finish, it's interesting because it's technically two different categorized climbs. And we talked about this already, how there was a downhill in between them. So that final categorized climb is actually quite short. It's only 4.6K. But it's 4.6K at 7.7% after they had already done a climb that was a Category 1 climb.
And I think that's a diluted average. It looked really steep in spots on the TV. It's narrow. The pavement is bad. It looked like a finishing climb should look on a kind of Queen Stage day.
Yeah, and the best climber in the race won the Queen Stage.
He did. This was the statement win. This was the it's over, right? Because he attacked not on the final climb. He attacked on the previous climb, and really, it wasn't like I think Danny Martinez tried to hold his wheel
for a hot second.
Couldn't get even close.
Yeah.
It was very big statement attack. And we'll talk about this. I will try to talk about this later, but it felt like actually, like you mentioned racing for second, I thought there was actually good racing for second behind this. But it's interesting to note from my perspective, Pogačar did not, for a race crushing, victory assuring attack where he blew everyone else away, it still had moments of humanity. When he was coming up that final climb, you saw him get in what I would consider bailout gears, certainly for his caliber. He is sitting down in the saddle, spinning, going up the hill at 6 miles an hour in a couple of spots. And he actually lost about 15 seconds from the bottom of the final climb to the top over the chasing group. And some of that was celebrating, but at the same time, maybe he was like, this attack made me a little tired. I can't just smash it all the way to the finish.
I rode up a hard climb today at about 6 miles an hour in my lowest possible gears. Are you saying that I too might win a Grand Tour someday?
I am not saying that. What I'm saying is,
right. I could hope.
When I ride those gears, it's because I am out of energy.
Yes,
I want to say fucked, but I don't know if we get the little E, is that going to impact our? I don't know, but
I think it's fine. I'll add that when I upload. Yeah.
No,
I have to do it occasionally for Kaylee on the placeholders, so we can do it every now and then.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, it's just, there are certain gears that on pavement are for limping home to the finish.
Yeah.
And I saw Pogačar using those gears. He was using them better than me. He was going a lot faster than me, putting out more watts than me, but he usually doesn't use them. So.
Right. And we like a little bit of humanity in our dominant GC superstars. He did well, first of all, he finished, only 29 seconds ahead of Nairo Quintana, which we should say Nairo Quintana was on the attack out of the break. Did not win the stage, but looked good there for a while. The GC group was almost 3 minutes back. So Pogačar, this was race crushing as you described. That's a very adequate description, I would say. This is a huge attack. To have gained that much time over, like you said, he went a little farther out, but that's a pretty huge chunk of time. I don't think if you're listening to this show, you don't need us to tell you that Tadej Pogačar is really good at bike racing. But this is a statement. Winning on the top of the mountain in the pink jersey, it's everything that you want to do if you're the Grand Tour contender. So, yeah, he did it. Maybe this means he'll ease off in the next few days. We'll see. Rewind and maybe talk some other talking points. So I want to talk breakaways first, because it's been a main talking point for a lot of these stages for obvious reasons, because there are breakaways that have come close or have won quite a few stages at the Giro. And I think the Giro d'Italia, maybe more than the other Grand Tours, is the one that I sort of associate with the breakaways staying clear quite often on the mountain days. But just Grand Tours in general, if you are sizing up a stage and it looks like it's going to have a lot of mountains, that in and of itself is a great reason to get into a breakaway, because the sprinters teams won't chase. And we've seen quite often in the past, decade, the GC teams often don't chase either. And so the breakaways do quite well on the mountain stages, whether that's medium mountain days, high mountain days, whatever it is. That's the best chance for the breakaway riders. The sort of the interesting nugget, though, that I wanted to get to is something that Joe Lindsay pointed out in his stage report for stage 10, in which we saw Valentin Paré-Pant win from a breakaway, but it was a breakaway that got clear in the middle of the stage. And as Joe pointed out, that at the time was the third time this had happened thus far in the race. And that's a wrinkle in the breakaways getting away conversation that we should talk about, because I think we usually associate, a breakaway day with being that early break, the first move that gets clear, or at least the first one that sticks, because there's a big battle always on breakaway days, and people up the road for the first 20 minutes until something finally sticks. But as it turns out, it's been quite a few of these breaks that have gotten away a little later in the stage, and I feel like this represents a really interesting example of. I'm gonna be talking to a very specific section of our audience here, and the rest will have no clue. This is the gamers would say this is the meta shifting, because if you are getting into, if you're in a Grand Tour and you're constantly seeing that the early break is getting caught by a Tadej Pogacar's team that doesn't want anyone to get away, or by the other teams that are so dead set on trying to get in the break that if they miss it, they're going to help with the chase, then it starts to become the smart thing to do to wait for that second chance, to be on the alert, not throw yourself at the extremely difficult battle to get clear in that first 20 minutes that we see over and over again on these breakaway days. It's just extremely high speeds. The meta may be shifting to, hey, let's wait, make our move a little later. And apparently that's the hot new thing at this Giro. As Joe Lindsay pointed out at his Stage 10 report. So if you're listening to the pod, if you read Escape Collective, you may now be, hip to this new thing that you might want to wait a little bit on a breakaway day, not join that first move, and see if you might be able to make something happen, in the middle of the stage. Of course, to really hit this analogy that nobody's going to understand other than the gamers. And if enough people do this, then the meta will just shift back, and the good riders will say, "Oh, lots of people are waiting until this chance for a mid-race break. Well, let me get into the early break, because then I'll be the best one in there, because it'll just be a bunch of also rans in that move." So maybe that'll happen eventually. But right now, we seem it to be at this point where the mid-race break is the thing to do.
See, I wonder how much the Inter-Giro returning has to do with this.
Yes.
Because there are points out there that weren't out there before. Time
and people were definitely going for them too.
Yeah,
yeah, that's a good point.
I think it's really interesting, and I totally want to agree. I just sort of wonder. This is a relatively new thing. The entire stage being broadcast, at least being available to lots of people, and I'm kind of wondering if we have stable enough data prior to 2021, 2019, as to how Giro, and to a larger extent other Grand Tour breakaways have been formed and fallen apart, I definitely remember reading some live updates from way back in the day when there wasn't really coverage of there was like no video anywhere, and you'd get somebody in the team car sending what were basically doing live tweets, except there was no Twitter, obviously.
Right.
And they would talk about, the breakaway has been caught after 60K, and there now a new breakaway is going. But it would be interesting to see if anybody has solid data for this. But I would agree with what you're saying, that like anecdotally it seems 100% true.
I doubt the data's there. I'm gonna guess that there's not a lot of solid data.
Are there enough anecdotes from? Yeah, there's never. Right, it's just cycling, right? There's no data.
Then it becomes data.
Everybody knows their FTP. Nobody knows how many times somebody crashed in a bike race.
Well, that's a good point. Sticking with the Stage 10 theme to talk about a different topic, we had some listeners asking about why the decathlon team has been so successful this year, and then they won this stage. They'd won some stages at Romandy. While all this is happening at the Giro, by the way, Sam Bennett won a bunch of stages in the overall at the 4 Days of Dunkirk. So clearly decathlon's doing something right. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about it, because I think it's a lot of different little things. To me, there's a few things come to mind. So first, I think the team took a little while to figure out what they were as a team and what they should focus on. It took actually kind of a long while. after Romain Bardet left and they were no longer the Romain Bardet GC team. And I think they did not initially get that right, or they just maybe were kind of wandering and lost. So there was a little period there where they were, just trying to figure out what they were. They had some talent on the team. Obviously, they have riders who are capable of putting up GC top 10s. Benoit Cosnefroy can win hilly one-day races. So they had some talent, but I think they just needed a little bit of time to work that out. That now that they have, with a less of a GC focus, or maybe less all in on GC than they might have used to have been, they can focus on winning stages in stage races, and that's what they've been doing with Paris-Pont, with Dorian Godon at the Tour de Romandie. I think riders like that have been a result of good scouting, and they spent a lot of money on Greg van Avermaet at the end of his career, basically.
They kind of did a total energy on him there.
Yeah, and that didn't work out, which is about, I'm a big,
I love
really,
Greg.
Always liked Greg van Avermaet, but it didn't really work out for the team. And I think, again, once that was kind of off the books, or at least winding down, they could start focusing on bringing in some youth. I think they have done a really nice job with targeting specific race wins, and I think that doesn't get talked about enough. You can win World Tour stages at Romandie, at Basque Country or Catalonia, maybe. I would guess a little bit more easily than at Paris-Nice. And I think you could win a Grand Tour stage a little bit more easily at the Giro than you can at the Tour de France. I don't think that's too controversial to say. And I think that this is the team has been smart with where they've been putting their resources, going out and getting these wins. And then the other maybe major factor, and one that doesn't get talked about enough at all in any sport, is the chance probably plays a role. And they've gotten pretty lucky. And the breakaways they've gotten into with their good riders have worked. And that's important. You need that to win races. You need to not crash. Yeah.
I want to disagree with you just for sports talk radio purposes, but no, I agree. And I think I want to believe that this is somehow related to Decathlon becoming more of an international company versus like the French REI. There's, they have their GC guys on Australian now, even though we're talking about not really being GC.
No, you're right. You're right. Yeah.
I think there is still somehow a certain amount of marketability to being the top French rider in the Tour de France. And that is, no disrespect intended to French riders, that is not a particularly challenging title to get. Like if you're
right now, at least. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think if you are selling things to people in the United States and to Great Britain and to Germany and to all these other places around the world where people are watching cycling, you want to have people getting headlines throughout the season. You want to have them getting wins. You want to have them in pictures. You want to have people talking about how cool they were racing versus trying to maintain 9th place overall in the tour for 3 weeks. So that's really cool to see. And I would love to see more teams kind of do this sort of thing, because I think it helps the sport grow. Like having an emphasis on races that are not the Tour de France and things that are not the Tour de France GC are important, because there are a lot more interesting riders that can win those things versus Tadej Pogacar and Jonas Vingegaard, who are relatively, well, I mean, Vingegaard is interesting in a different kind of way, but he's like, that's the two characters you get. And with the entire sport going after all sorts of finishes, you got lots of different people, lots of different posters to put on the wall, lots of different styles of racing to pretend that you're doing when you're out training. It's yeah, I think it's good. I'm a big fan.
Let's talk about Pogacar, because I think he said in his press conference a week ago that maybe he could kind of take it a little bit easier now that he had a lead with the Tour on his mind. Maybe he kind of did that sort of, but he didn't look like he was doing that today.
I mean, it was
Sunday.
every day except today, though, right? Because I mean, we saw Bahrain victorious, taking over the pacemaking. We saw
that's true.
We saw him really kind of floating in that GC group, just trying to not lose time at finishes. And then today it was like, by the way, I am the best rider in this race.
Right. I do think there is an even greater likelihood of that happening now in the race, that he kind of eases off just a tad. I feel like he's kind of damned if he does, damned if he doesn't, a little bit from the fan entertainment perspective, where we, on the one hand, at least we in the media who want this to be a battle, we want people to have a reason to watch, right? Because if he's miles ahead, then there's less reason to tune into at least for the GC days. And so, yeah, we want him to maybe not dominate. But on the other side is if he hangs out in the pack every day and doesn't attack, well, that's also kind of boring. So I do kind of feel like he's in a tough spot from a like how to please all the people watching perspective. And hopefully he doesn't care. Hopefully he just doesn't care what we want him to do. But I can understand why it would be frustrating if people are like, oh, Tadej Pogačar dominated again, because if he just sat in the pack all day, people would be like, oh, he just sat in the pack all day and rested on his laurels, which, we've heard that for years with Sky. So
it was interesting. He gave his finish interview today was pretty cool. He was like, yeah, of course we were targeting this. We had a plan. We've been looking into this since last December. But he also like shouted out all the other guys in the race. He gave props to Quintana. He gave props to Georg Steinhauser, I think. Stonehouse?
Yeah, the F-Rider.
Georgie Stonehouse. It's cool to see him kind of pushing that attention around, even though he is clearly, the dominant rider. And I think, I honestly, and again, maybe an outlier here, when Pogačar goes up the road and it looks like he's gone, I would love to see a lot more footage of what the group is doing behind. Because, when he initially went, we saw Dane Martinez, attempt very unsuccessfully to try and even get to his wheel. We saw Thomas turn around, kind of looking at the group, seeing who on his team was still there, really kind of organizing that, how are we going to play this out? Pogačar's gone, obviously. This is a place where we can still gain time. I think there's only 4 seconds between him and Martinez on the GC. It is super tight. The Young Jersey race is now super tight because we had Wietebrooks drop out from illness. So, there's a lot of battles to keep up on that may be happening just behind Pogačar. And I'd love to see more footage of that. Obviously, that is a nightmare in the switching room, that is a nightmare for the switcher and the director in the production truck, because it's already confusing enough to try and put together a bike race. But
I think what we really need is for there to be an Italian person at Geraint Thomas's in the group with him at all times.
That would be
because then the director would show us, right? And we know Tiberi lost a ton of time over the last few days. He's still up. He's still top 5, but
I think he's isn't he still winning the Young Rider competition?
Yeah, maybe that's enough reason to put a camera on him. I guess, maybe, but I don't know. Maybe there's some.
He just needs to keep up. He just needs to be in the.
In any case,
that's true. Yeah, he is not the. It will be tough for him for a couple of years before he can be the Tifosi's choice.
But in any case, at any Grand Tour, you just you kind of hope that whatever rider you are watching gets to ride alongside someone from the home country, because then you're going to get to see them on the screen. Before we move on, one last topic: the sprints at the Giro have raised an issue we've talked about a bunch of times before. Merlier getting relegated. To me, it seemed like it wasn't a super obvious relegation. I thought it was the right call, but I don't think it was super obvious. I was a little surprised that he was relegated when he didn't cause a crash. And I think that's a good thing. I think you should be relegated for doing something wrong, regardless of the outcome. Yeah.
You want it to be repeatable, right?
Yes.
You want, the rules in the rule book don't even agree with each other. They use different language. The definition of an irregular sprint is including pulling the jersey or saddle of another rider, intimidation or threat, blow from the head, knee, elbow, shoulder, hand, etc. And etc. is covering a lot of ground.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah,
we need rules that are more than a sentence long. We needed them not to say things like the chosen line or the lane they selected when launching the sprint. There are multiple launches in every sprint.
Right.
It's just you need a defined this is what one rider can do in relation to the course, in relation to the other riders. This is the intent of the rule. This is how the rule should be interpreted by juries. These are things that are, we don't need to look at them twice. That is an instant disqualification. These are things where you get more leeway. Just sit down, do a lock-in at the rec center with like Luke Rowe and Robbie McEwen and all the current sprinters and the TV production people. Just get everybody in a room and say, what can you film reliably? What can we see? What's gonna be something that we can enforce repeatably, simply, so that fans understand, so that riders know what they can do and can't do, and we see a good bike race instead of just like arbitrary results adjustment based on feels.
Yep, I agree. Totally, completely agree. Also, you reminded me that when I've had that broadcast audio on, I've enjoyed Luke Rowe as a commentator. I think he's done a nice job.
He's great.
So.
I kind of want him to get more irritated. I miss him in the peloton as that enforcer. Like, you could be doing something like just the most minor things seemed, you could see him just like upright in the peloton shouting at somebody for trying to take a pee break at the wrong time, or like not doing a good enough job grabbing their bottle. Like I like that. I like that kind of old hand in the shop, not tolerating newbies, letting everybody know like where, keeping everybody in order. The guy in the shop ride,
he's been so pleasant on the broadcast.
Yeah, no, he's very pleasant, and he's really good at explaining. Like
he is, yep.
He'll say something and then take a couple minutes to be like, this is what that phrase means. Here's an example from my career. Like it's great.
Yeah. Yep. All right. While all the Giro action was going on, over in Spain, the third of 3 Women's World Tour stage races in the past few weeks, the Vuelta a Burgos happened. We will touch on it as always, and then we'll kind of throw it over to Wheel Talk to do a bit more analysis. But what's your headline from Burgos, Cosmo?
Demi Vollering wins the closest thing the women have to a Grand Tour. Like
the not just Burgos, you mean across all three?
The Vuelta, Itzulia, Burgos. That's a lot of racing. It's stage racing. It happens all at once. Demi Vollering won all of those races. Not particularly closely contested, for better or for worse.
So mathematically, her accumulated time across all 3 would then also be the shortest. So.
Yes, but I mean, you should just squish them together. Be like, here we go. Women's Vuelta, 2 weeks. Let's do it.
Vollering and all of SD Works really is the headline because they won 3 of the 4 stages at Burgos, but. We should point out that first stage was not an SD Works win.
It was not.
It was a victory for Lara Gentala, and this is really cool to see someone take a break from racing, a break that lasted for some time, and then come back, and this was her first win since then. She races for EF now in 2024. On the other hand, it was a crash-marred sprint, and I think that impacted the sprint, but somebody had to win, and the fact that it was one, not an SD Works rider, it was a lot of Gentala.
It was a great team win. Like EF did a great job kind of monitoring the stuff SD Works was doing without overdoing it. There was a time when they tried to gutter the field, and you could actually see there was another EF rider with Gentala kind of looking back like, hey, you there? You getting a good draft? We're going to stick in this? We're good? They placed her right where she needed to be when the lead out happened. Yeah, crash certainly opened things up for her. She really only had to worry about one side of the road. But still, like, you get in the position to win when things go wrong. That's still a win. So, yeah.
Yeah. Head over to Wheel Talk for more on that. I'm sure Abby and company will break things down. The other, not World Tour, but still kind of big race going on at this time was Dunkirk, where I think it has to be said that the sprint field was not spectacular. But Sam Bennett won 4 of the 6 stages at the 4 days of Dunkirk. Whatever. He won 4 of them, and he did win the overall. Pascal Ackermann was there, so there was some caliber of sprinter. And just to see Bennett consistently up there over and over and over again, that's a big deal. Because it's one thing to get a single win, and it can just, maybe everything worked out for you on that day. But to win 4 stages, that to me says that he is in form. And that's really, really encouraging to see for a rider who not that long ago looked like the fastest sprinter in the world and then just had a pretty long stretch where things just didn't go his way.
Am I crazy, or does that correlate with working with Pat Lefevre?
There does seem to be some...
I'm just putting it out there.
There seems to be some of that. Yeah. I mean, he had his best season with that team. He won 2 stages of the Tour de France. But yeah, I think it's probably a little bit hard to work there. Yeah. And now at Decathlon, the team that we've already talked about having some success this year, looks like he's starting to get back on track. Hopefully we will see more of that. I will unashamedly say I would love to see more Sam Bennett wins. Yeah, so we'll see if that can happen. I think he's slated to race the Dauphiné coming up here. All right, let's talk about what's coming up at the Giro d'Italia. So we have the final week ahead of us. And unsurprisingly, lots of climbing. Stage 16 was slated to go over the Stelvio, which was the Cima Coppi, the highest point in the race. Instead, they will do the Umbrail Pass, which is right there in that same area, and is still the highest point in the race, not quite as high or as hard, I think, as the Stelvio. And then actually, after they do that, interestingly enough, it's actually like kind of a early, difficult challenge to take on, and then there's not a whole lot of challenges on that stage until the very end, when they do a Cat 1 quick descent into a Cat 2. So a climber day, but if you stick the Cima Coppi a little bit closer to the end of the stage, you might have a little bit more of a climber day. So that's 16. As we often say on these kinds of stages, looks like a great breakaway day. Stage 17 looks like a perfect breakaway day because it's kind of up and down all day. Very challenging, climber-friendly day. I think this could have some GC implications, which, take that for what it's worth with having one rider like 3 hours ahead of everybody else in the GC. But in the second and third place battles, we might have some GC implications on stage 17, even if I think the break contests the win. Stage 18 is a great day for the sprinters. It's mostly downhill until the flat run into Padua, possibly another opportunity for Jonathan Milan. Stage 19, another great breakaway day. One of those not that hard climbing kind of days, but too hard for the sprinters. So we'll probably just see, who knows, maybe a Pare Ponce or Alaphilippe.
I want my Alaphilippe content.
Could be an Alaphilippe content kind of day. And then stage 20 is the last big mountain stage, 2 trips up and over the Monte Grappa, which is a tough one. Really, a really tough one, actually. It's a pretty serious Cat 1. In terms of, on the scale of like Cat 1 difficulty, I feel like it's kind of on the
18
very
kilometers
top
at
end
8%.
of that spectrum.
Yeah, that's pretty big.
Yeah, it's pretty close to being a beyond categorization.
Yeah, they don't do that in the Giro, do they?
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, so if this
even
were
no
a French race or a Spanish race.
No.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a really tough one. I would imagine that it's a breakaway day, but maybe Tadej Pogacar will decide that nobody else gets to have their fun. And then the race will end next Sunday in Rome with some circuits in the city and probably a sprint winner. We'll see. Yeah, that's what's coming up at the Giro.
They're trolling France with this one because they know they can't finish in Paris. And so they're finishing in Rome. Be like, hey, our capital, our eternal city is open.
I am intrigued by the Nice finish. It's cool to mix it up a little bit, right?
I mean, they finish in Nice every spring.
Well, that's true. You're not wrong about that.
I just,
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
All right, I think that's it for us. As ever, I had a great time here, Cosmo, and let's do it again next week.
Sounds good to me.
I'm Dane Cash, and I guess I just said your name, but tell us again, who are you and what was this?
I'm Cosmo Catalano, and that was the How the Race Was Won podcast.